Now, when it comes to language, we often use the same word to refer to different things. For example, we use the word race when we're talking about the human race, a group of humans, a species on the planet. And we also use the word race to distinguish different ethnicities and heritages among that human race. And I don't think I need to explain all the history, in fact, some terrible history, associated with the concept of race. So Dungeons & Dragons now uses the word species instead of race when building your character. And I think overall this is a good decision. However, somehow that still manages to upset some people. Another thing that surprised me is how many people were bothered by the fact that ability scores have been moved from species to background. In the new Dungeons & Dragons, your background will determine your starting ability bonuses. And I'm going to address that by the end of this video, and it's a pretty short video, so hang with me. In the meantime, let's go ahead and take a look at what the design team has to say about the new Origins chapter from the Player's Handbook.
So when you're making your character now, you will first choose your class, the most important choice you make for your character, and then you will flesh out your character's origin. And so it's when you start pondering those questions that you turn toward the character origins chapter. And you will essentially be going back in time in your character's backstory. So again, you start with your class, then you'll ponder, well, what was my character's background? And then you keep going back in time in your character's origin to your birth. And that's when you then ponder your character's species. And your species choice and your background choice together combine to give you a number of critical game capabilities that will really help flesh out your character.
So the new version of D&D uses the term origin to refer to both your species and your background. And backgrounds, like they used to, provide proficiency bonuses and starting equipment. But now they also provide ability score bonuses and a new feat. The feats have been divided up into origin feats, and epic feats. So origin feats are a group of feats that you can take at first level. So you don't get access to all the feats at first level for two reasons. One is game balance, because we know some feats are probably going to be a little more powerful than others. So those are reserved for once you're higher level. The other thing is ease of use for new players. You don't want to give new players an overwhelming choice with so many feats to choose from, because this edition is going to have 75 different feats. That's more than both the Player's Handbook and Xanathar's put together, if I'm remembering correctly.
Those two things in particular, the ability score adjustments that backgrounds bring, as well as the feat, mean your background will have an effect on your character for your entire career. And that was something that was not necessarily the case in 2014 backgrounds, except for perhaps the proficiencies you got. Right. You would still enjoy those throughout your career. But now there are more parts of your character that are forever affected by your character's background. We did this because we want backgrounds to interlock with as many appropriate classes as possible. Previously, when we previewed this approach to backgrounds of them providing ability score adjustments, one of the downsides of the playtest version is it kind of hard-locked the backgrounds to specific classes. Yeah. And we did not want to proceed with that because in some ways that was recreating the exact problem that we were getting away from 2014 species. Because in 2014, these ability score adjustments existed inside the playable species. And one of the reasons we moved it out of there is we didn't like how that drove certain species to be combined with certain classes. We wanted people to feel more free to mix and match.
So backgrounds now give you 3 different ability scores that you can improve. So you have the choice of putting a +2 in one ability score and a +1 in another, or a +1 in all 3 of the options provided by your background. So for example, the Acolyte provides bonuses to intelligence, wisdom, and charisma, while the Guide provides bonuses to dexterity, constitution, and wisdom. This way, if you were building a druid, for example, and you took the Guide background, you could put a +2 in your wisdom and a +1 in your constitution. Or if you were making a ranger, you could put a +1 in all 3. Or if you were making a rogue, you could put the +2 in dexterity and the +1 in constitution. It's up to you to decide how to distribute those 3 points, which I think overall is not bad game design. Me personally, I would just do away with ability score bonuses altogether. Don't attach them to species, don't attach them to backgrounds, and just increase the overall stat array or point buy options at the beginning, so you just customize your ability scores how you want.
And then there's the whole other half of your origin, your species.
Right, and we've got a lot of new things in the species. We've got new additions. So the orc has joined, Goliaths have joined, and
The Aasimar.
Goliaths are very Goliath because now they're tied to giants. Not surprisingly, if you have the background being a cloud giant in your heritage, then you can kind of, Misty Step away, teleport away, because you're more of a trickster. But it's all based off like hill giant, storm, stone. All of it has different abilities that you can choose from.
And that is a part of the theme that we had with the species, which was to really lean into the fantasy of each one.
So this is the pain point I was referring to at the beginning. A number of people don't like the idea of removing ability scores away from species because they say it makes the species less unique. And I would agree with you if we were talking about an OSR version of the game. But we're talking about 5th edition. 5th edition assigns so many abilities to species, and the new version of the game is going to increase that even more. You just heard Todd Kendrick rave about the Goliath, and Aasimar is also added to the core species. The Aasimar now gets to choose their celestial ability every time they use it, instead of locking in that choice at character creation. The Orc's Adrenaline ability now refreshes on both a short rest and a long rest, and Orcs get greater dark vision, as well as Dwarves get greater dark vision, and Dwarves get a limited use tremor sense. Dragonborn's breath weapon now counts as an attack and not an action, so once you get multi-attack, you can use your breath weapon as one of your attacks instead of your entire action. Also, Dragonborn get wings at higher levels. And remember the Goliath we talked about earlier? Once they get to higher levels, they can increase their size like a giant. Even halflings and humans have gotten upgrades. They haven't told us what the halflings upgrade is yet, but humans get to choose an extra origin feat. I say that to share all the cool things that we know so far about the new game, but I also share it to make the point that I don't think Forgotten Realms has watered down the species that much. For me, removing ability scores from species doesn't really change the fantasy of these different species. Dragonborn still breathe fire, Tieflings still have magic. There are differences between the species based on all their abilities, and the new version of D&D is dialing that up a few notches. Now, I might agree with you if you argued that Forgotten Realms setting has these homogenous city-states where multiple species all live together in these big urban environments, and I could see how that would kind of water down the distinctions between the species. But that's a setting issue. That's not a game mechanic issue. I feel like the game mechanics are strong enough and they do represent the different qualities of these different species without needing ability scores attached to them.
We have a rule in the character creation chapter on how to use backgrounds or species from other books that don't appear in this book. So any species or background that appears in this book that also appeared in an earlier book, the version in the new player's handbook is now the canonical version. But if there's, say, a species or background in an older book that is not in the new player's handbook and you would still like to use it, you can. And again, the character creation chapter provides guidance on how you can do that.
So what Jeremy Crawford means there is that the species in the new player's handbook are the go-to version of that species. That's what you should be using moving forward if you're playing the 2024 edition. However, you can incorporate other species that aren't represented in the new player's handbook. You can take those old species and rework them by this new rule that he was just talking about. The other thing is, in the Dungeon Master's Guide, there's going to be a customized background option to teach Dungeon Masters how to make their own backgrounds. So if there are any backgrounds that are not included in the new version of the Player's Handbook, you can create those as well. Overall, I think they're doing a good job with the new version of D&D, and I'm excited to see more as we get more videos over the course of the next few days. Thanks again for visiting the Dire Den, and I'll see you next time.